It's only been 3 years since that deal was signed, and the top of the market went from the 46 that he signed for to now the top of the market is $60 million per year. So
exactly, and that's exactly why we didn't want to do the 10-year deal in Houston, right? Because we knew that the market would continue to grow, and if you lock yourself in for that many years, normally, if you believe in the player, it's not going to be a good deal.
Welcome to the next episode of the Athletes First Family Podcast, the quarterback series. I am Brian Murphy, Athletes First CEO, joined once again by my co-host, AJ Stevens, one of the best negotiators in the business. Welcome back, AJ.
Thanks, Murph. Excited to be back for another episode with David Mulugheta. Athletes First, on this podcast, we talk about the quarterbacks that we represent. We currently have $1.4 billion in quarterback deals on our books. Goes to speak to our experience with quarterbacks, and today we're going to talk about the Deshaun Watson deals with David. So welcome back, David.
Hey, man, happy to be back.
Yep, no, David, welcome back. David Mulugheta, for anyone who doesn't know, living under a rock, is Athletes First equity partner and super Uber agent, Forbes #1. And we're here to talk about the deals he's negotiated for Deshaun Watson and the relationship they created, but because that's the quarterback series, right? And we're also going to further talk about Jordan Love's deal, but David is not just a quarterback agent, right? He's also done the highest deal in NFL history for several other players, several other positions. Tell us about it.
Antoine Winfield Jr., Jalen Ramsey twice, Budda Baker, Kevin Byard, Michael Thomas, Kelechi Osemele, Derwin James. The list goes on and on, right?
Yep.
But we're going to talk about the quarterbacks today. So we're going to talk about Deshaun today. We'll get to Jordan Love at a later date. But we're going to dive into both of Deshaun's deals that you did.
Worth mentioning, David asked me to mention that he did $1 billion of deals last year by himself. First agent in history. And he also, you forgot to mention, he is Forbes #1, right? The youngest agent ever to be Forbes #1 and the first African-American agent to ever be Forbes #1. So that was what David insisted we say when we come back. So anything else you want to share?
You keep going.
All right, good. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to keep going. I am going to kind of set the scene here. In our last podcast, we talked about you recruiting Deshaun out of Clemson and what a life-changing moment that was for both of you. We're going to go to 2017 here, right? And Deshaun Watson was the number 12 overall pick of the Houston Texans. Had a lot of success early on in his career, named to the all-rookie team before getting injured. Then he made the Pro Bowl in 2018, made the Pro Bowl in 2019, all on the rookie contract that you negotiated. And so the 2019 season ends, 3 years in the NFL, you can start the negotiations. When did those discussions begin? Like, how did that happen after?
I don't remember exact date that it began, but those discussions started shortly after his third year.
Okay.
So I don't remember the exact time frame, but probably that May.
And this is 2020, so this is the start of COVID.
Exactly.
And the world has a lot of unknowns. We know what the salary cap is for 2020, but we don't know what it's going to be in 2021. Everyone's telling us that there's going to be a drastic fall off.
Correct.
So then, people are kind of speculating, like, will that affect the growth of the quarterback market or all positional markets, right? And so we did see one quarterback deal get done before Deshaun's.
Patrick still got done.
Patrick Mahomes. And his was it's a 10-year deal. It on the face of it, it says it averages $45 million per year. I want to know, how did that affect your negotiations? Because you still had 2 more months of negotiating before you got the deal done.
I mean, obviously the Mahomes deal came across the ticker. And, when we first saw it, we were kind of a little taken aback. For obvious reasons, it was a 10-year extension with 2 years left on the deal. So it was a 12-year deal. And we hadn't seen a lot of that, right? I think the most recent deals in the marketplace were around 4 years or so. Some 4-year deals. I think there might have been a couple 5-year deals. But for us, we took the time to kind of break that deal down. As you stated, on his face, it was I think it was a 10-year, $450 million extension. But as we kind of looked into it, we realized, that wasn't the average over the entire deal, right? It was, I think the average over the first 4 years, you correct me if I'm wrong, was around $38.9 million, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah, I'm getting old, but not too old. But it was about $38.9 million. So for us going into it, obviously we think, the world of Patrick and, phenomenal football player, arguably one of the best to ever do it. But for us, we felt just as positive about Deshaun. We knew where his arrows pointed. Phenomenal football player, phenomenal person. So for us, it was about trying to figure out what was the right deal for Deshaun.
Right. And so if I'm the Texans and I see the Mahomes deal get done, I'm probably putting together a 10-year proposal to send to you. Did they do that?
Of course, yeah. We got it shortly after the Mahomes deal gets done. We get a 10-year offer, 10-year extension offer from the Texans. Obviously, that was not something that we were interested in for obvious reasons. And the salary cap continues to go up every year. So for us, it was about, we wanted to stay within that 4 or 5 year range, but also maximize what he was able to get. So we, like, as I stated earlier, we kind of locked in on that first 4 year cash flow for Mahomes, which was $38.9 million a year, and decided our goal would be to surpass that, right? To say, okay, we plan on doing a 4 year deal. If we can make more money on average over the first 4 years, we consider that a win, because then we'd get back to the table, sometime before year 4, and then over the same amount of time, we were very certain we'd make more money as opposed to doing a 10-year extension and locking that in currently.
Got it. So in the negotiation, you're kind of segmenting out the Mahomes deal and saying we're only going to acknowledge the first couple of years and completely disregard that the team has control of his football rights for another 6 years after that, and say we just want to beat that.
Correct.
Texans probably, AJ, you and I talked about this, but they probably threw out the Drew Bledsoe Athletes First precedent where we did a 10-year deal with them, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if Nick Cassero was even there at the time when we did that deal. But yeah, no. So, so you have uncertainty everywhere, right? You have COVID, so you don't know exactly what the salary cap's going to be, which is a pretty important variable in the negotiation. For sure. You have this new 10-year extension, 12-year deal for arguably the best quarterback in the league. And then that's like, they're going to want to use that. They're off making 10-year deal, but like, you're not going to use that. So you got to say, hey, they're like, it's good enough for Patrick, it should be good enough for Deshaun. You're like, no, it's not. This is what we're going to do. So you have luxury. And this is the first big quarterback deal you're working on, right? I mean,
correct.
You did the rookie deal, but so how are you feeling? Are you kind of confused by all this? Like, why is it so difficult? Or did you just focus in and work with you and the team and figure out what Deshaun wanted?
Well, no. I mean, for me, it was a matter of, I kind of look at every negotiation individually, right? And, what does Deshaun specifically bring to the Houston Texans? And that's kind of how I approach every contract negotiation. Is you got to understand your leverage, you got to understand the team's leverage, and then you got to understand how you want to kind of game plan to get to the end result that you want. So for me, again, I didn't, I wouldn't say it necessarily mattered to me that it was my first quarterback deal.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a different type of leverage you have when you're dealing with a quarterback, especially with one as good as Deshaun. So, again, we figured out what our end goal was, which was we wanted to be the highest paid quarterback in the history of the NFL. Patrick had just done his deal. We had zero interest in doing a 10-year extension because, again, like we said, we knew the cap continues to go up. And, at some point, if you do a 10-year extension, you're going to be underpaid. So for us, we locked in on the 4-year deal, which was $38.9 for Mahomes, and decided, okay, we want to be above that number, and kind of just worked our way backwards on how to get there.
And with whom were you dealing?
We were dealing with mostly Bill O'Brien at the time, initially. Bill was obviously the coach there, but he had taken over duties as a GM as well, which kind of, made the negotiations a little different than normal, right? Because normally you're dealing with either a general manager or a team's contract guy. And the head coach normally stays out of that because obviously he has a very personal relationship with especially the quarterback, right? They talk every day. Bill O'Brien's an offensive-minded head coach, so he obviously is in the room with Deshaun at all times. So normally those type of guys want to stay out of those conversations. So initially the conversations were with Bill, and they progressed. And I think as we started getting more into the nitty-gritty details, he decided that it probably made the most sense for him to remove himself from those negotiations. Just because, again, when you get to that point in the contract, the team is going to do everything they can to tell you why the players shouldn't get this amount of money. And then you as an agent are going to tell the team why you think he does deserve that, right? And as the head coach who deals with the player and has that personal relationship, I think Bill decided he didn't want to have those conversations. He didn't feel comfortable trying to harp on maybe, I don't want to say the negative aspects of Deshaun's game, but basically, making those arguments for the team. So he handed that over to Jack Easterby, who at the time, I'm not super sure what the exact role that Jack had there, but he worked with their contract guy there, and that's who the negotiations kind of ended with. Yep.
And Coach O'Brien's known as a player's coach, had a great relationship with like Matt Castle and all the quarterbacks in New England, and just everyone, all the players loved him. And so that's got to be a hard position where to wear both hats. And we don't see a lot of head coaches do that, And then Jack also came from New England and took it over. Did you ever talk with the owners? Did the owner get involved at all or not?
No, the owners didn't get involved. Cal never got involved in that. I think he felt comfortable with, the people that he had put in place from, Coach O'Brien to Jack and kind of the rest of the team to get that done. And, it took a little longer than maybe we would have wanted, but we were able to come to a number and agree. I think we ended up at $39 million a year, if I remember correctly. We were able to secure the deal that made, as far as we were concerned, Deshaun the highest paid quarterback in the NFL because his deal was only 4 years long. So we kind of only focused on the 4 years that Mahomes had. So for us, we felt like it was a win at the time. I think Patrick I think he had already won a Super Bowl, right? Am I correct? I think he had already won a Super Bowl. He had been the league MVP already, had been a Super Bowl MVP. So he had accomplished, I guess on paper, more than Deshaun had accomplished at the time. So when we were able to get to where we wanted to, as far as becoming the highest paid quarterback over those 4 years, we felt good about it. Deshaun felt good about it, and we were able to, kind of make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that one thing we emphasize here on this show too is like Deshaun's coming off of 3 amazing seasons. Like there's no limit to how great he can be, and he's also, as you know, unbelievable in the community. Does a lot of charity work, foundation work, and so I think the Houston Texans also got a win in a way, right? They got their franchise quarterback. They thought, and this is they lock him up for only 4 years, but like that's a foundation for where they wanted to go. So, a great job. One reason we have AJ here is to really tell us all the details that you may not remember about that contract. I certainly don't, but give us the details.
And then the final deal ends up being, you looked at the Mahomes deal and you said, on the face it averages 45, but common misconception that we've talked about on a lot of these episodes is that the deal doesn't necessarily average 45 through each of the years, right? So in Mahomes' deal, it averages at $38.9 million through 4 years. So you use that as the benchmark to get a 4-year extension at $39 million per year. It was $110 million guaranteed. And in the first 2 years, which were the last 2 years of his rookie deal, he gets essentially a $20 million raise above what was left on his rookie deal, right?
Correct.
Which, I want to point out now because we get to a point with his next deal where he hadn't actually got to the first year of his extension when he has this transition to the Browns.
Oh, don't give you can't give away the story. Come on now.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
But, getting ahead of myself.
So a phenomenal deal. How does Deshaun feel about this veteran deal? Because
he was excited, super excited about it. Prepared to get back and play ball. Deshaun's football focused. He's one of those guys that he never even really asked about the deal. In his mind, it was always just let me know when it's done. I mean, that's kind of how he approached it was let me know when it's done. Let me know when I can kind of turn my attention. I don't even want to say turn his attention because he never was focused on the deal, but just kind of let me know when it's done so we can get that over with and kind of move on and get focused on the next season. Yeah. So, but he was excited. He wanted to be in Houston. That's where, he wanted to be. So he was excited about kind of the future there.
That's great. And then, AJ, one thing, we talked about in other podcasts is you've worked in all the top quarterback deals with David, with Todd, with Ryan, with Justin. Like, this is one of your first deals with David that you did, right?
No, I wasn't here yet.
Oh, you weren't even here yet?
This one without me.
Oh,
this before AJ arrived, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Why do we need AJ then if you do this without him? You know what I mean?
No, my guy AJ is always helpful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so David, like in this negotiation, like what do you remember most about what you had to do? Like the strategy you had to do or the approach, like what was unique for it?
I think, like I said, the most unique thing about that negotiation was the fact that Coach O'Brien was involved, right? I just had never dealt with a situation where there was a head coach that was kind of, for all intent and purposes, running the negotiation for the team side. So that was not only was it the first time I did a large quarterback deal, but it was the first time I dealt with a head coach kind of taking the lead there. And then kind of him stepping away and a new face being kind of introduced as the head of the lead for the contract negotiations is a little different than I've seen in the past, right? Normally you deal with one person, that person is kind of the face of it for the team, and you guys work through, whatever you got to work through. So kind of that shift in dynamics, now you're dealing with a whole different personality from Coach O'Brien to Jack. I think that was a little different. So I would say that was the most unique part about it. But outside of that, again, when you have clients that kind of believe in you and have faith that you're going to get the deal done and they allow you to do your job, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. And we talked in the last episode about how Deshaun was your first big time quarterback client, right? And surely through this contract negotiation, he must have been, I picked the right guy. He worked out pretty well.
Yeah, no, he was definitely excited. His family was excited. So now super happy for him.
Yeah. And then Deshaun goes out the next year, right? And the team doesn't play as well as they would have liked, but Deshaun has 4,800 passing yards that year and then 33 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. I think franchise records in a bunch of different categories. And I think he was a first quarterback since Jeff George in 1997 to lead the NFL in passing on a team with 12 losses. So, he has a pretty historic year. Everything goes great. And then, things happen and, off-field issues and maybe the team's not going the right direction. And then so it's decided that maybe Deshaun should leave Houston. And how did that happen? How did that decision? Did you tell the team you want to leave? Team said you want to leave? Was it mutual or?
I think at the time there was a lot of kind of influx what was going on with the team as far as what the leadership was. Again, O'Brien had recently departed. Kind of, where the team was headed and kind of what the leadership looked like was a situation that Deshaun, didn't feel was going to be best for the team moving forward. Conversations were had and, decided that it made the most sense for him to look for a trade. And we were, kind of given the opportunity to kind of decide, go out there and decide, see who else might be interested.
Yep. And then there's a year he's on Texas, but he didn't play, right? Is that right? So he had a historic year, like crazy historic year, and then a year they didn't play. And those, AJ, you were saying those are the 2 years of his original contract, right?
Right.
So you didn't get to the new deal, but you got the money from the new deal.
Right. Yeah, he had gotten $20 million of the new deal during those last 2 years of his rookie contract.
Yeah, and then it's decided you get permission, David, to seek a trade.
Correct.
Yeah, and what was so now you have a starting quarterback, made 2 Pro Bowls, led the league in passing. Usually they don't come up for trade, right? Like, what was your approach? What did you just send a letter to everyone and say, hey, Sean?
Well, no, again, I'm getting a little old, so I don't remember all the specific details, but we worked with Nick Caserio, who at that time had been named the GM of the team, who's still there, obviously doing a phenomenal job. But we worked with Nick. We kind of put it out there like, look, he's looking to be traded. So teams, if I remember correctly, were calling in, and all the teams that wanted or that were interested in trading for Deshaun made themselves known to the team, to the Texans and Nick gave us the opportunity then to talk to, the 4 or 5, 6, I think it was like 5 or 6 teams that, we felt like were serious contenders that wanted to trade for him. So we had a time period in which then we sat down with each one of those teams, kind of heard them out, what their plan would be for Deshaun, what their goals are, and kind of just, interviewed them, and they interviewed Deshaun and us. And at some point then when we decided which teams that we really wanted to talk to, we kind of started to narrow it down.
Yeah.
And then when we finally got to the team that we wanted to go to, we let Nick know. And I think initially they worked out a trade. And once that was, they had figured out the trade details, and they allowed us to then start working on contract details.
So you as the agent, you didn't have to, like, let's just say you want to go to the Dolphins, right? You didn't have to work out the trade with the Dolphins.
No. We just had to interview and kind of decide where we were willing to go.
Yeah.
Because we had a no trade clause in that first contract that we did for Deshaun. Therefore, I don't want to say we could dictate, but we had the opportunity to turn down, trade offers if we didn't want to go to that team. So once we found a team that we were comfortable with, and the Texans were then able to agree to trade parameters, then it was kind of tossed back into our court to figure out, could we get a contract done?
Sure. And I want to just take a little side step here. Like, a lot of times, like the general public, me before I became an agent, like you think, oh man, you got the agent versus the team, they're clashing, they're fighting, like, they're negotiating, like there's a battle. But like a lot of times, like there's you come to a point where like what's best for the player is also best for the team, or you make it that way, and so you work together. And you mentioned Nick Caserio, who we've all worked with for a long time. He wasn't very helpful to me in the West Welcome negotiations, but other than that, talk about that. Like, what? So are you now on the same side of the table as Nick and working together to?
Yeah. I think again, we had, once you come to the understanding between the two parties, the team and the agent and the player and their side, that it makes most sense for the player then to move on. I think then you have to be on the same team, right? Because the player wants to move on, the team wants to get fair compensation back. So you try to figure out a win-win for both sides. So yeah, we're working together. And once, like I said, once we were able to kind of narrow down where we wanted to be, they were able to figure out a trade. Then, we figured out the contract part of it, and, he was a Cleveland Brown.
Yeah. So, but at that point, so like going in order, you guys interviewed with a bunch of teams. What was Deshaun looking for in a team? What was the board?
He wanted to win. I think that was the most important to him, was like, where could he go to win? And for him, it was kind of talking to the team. He talked to all the ownership for each one of the teams that were interested, to the head coach, the OC, quarterback coach, and just kind of worked his way through the list of questions that he had. And most of them had to do with, roster, how they would use him, what their goal was over the next few years. And, I think every conversation we had post those meetings where, okay, this is how I feel about this team, and this is the likelihood that we can get to a playoffs, we can get to a Super Bowl, we can win a championship. So I think that was by far the most important thing to him.
Yep. Especially, I mean, he won the championship in college, right? And so, like, he had a taste of it. And so then, so you narrow it down, you say, like, okay, we want to go with Cleveland. And then Nick does it works with their GM, and they figure out the trade component. But then at that point, you need to figure out what his contract's going to be. But, like, do you have zero leverage then because you have to go to Cleveland? Or like, how? I mean, what kind of leverage? Like, what was that situation?
No, I don't think the leverage changed because we didn't have to go to Cleveland, right? We had numerous teams that were interested. Initially, funny enough, that was one of the first teams that he had kind of decided he was not going to go to, and that was only because it was, he's from the South, he's from Georgia, he wants to stay, close to that area if he got to decide. Obviously, his family's there, and there was a lot of teams in that area that were obviously interested in him, and just going that far away, as well as he just hadn't played in that type of weather. Yeah. Whether it was in college when he was at Clemson, or growing up in Georgia, he'd always played in warm weather. So that was kind of one of the concerns and just the thought process. But as we started talking to the GM there, Andrew Berry, and talking to kind of the other players there, he figured out, hey, this is a place that I think I can play. And then he started looking at the roster, and he's like, man, this is actually, I like this roster the best, right? They are the most playoff-ready, championship-ready team. And he believed in the OC, the head coach, obviously. So he was like, you know what, this is where I want to go. But once they agreed on a trade, and we were able to start talking contracts, I don't think the leverage changes at all, right? Because if we can't get a contract done with the Browns, we just go back to the Texans and say, okay, this didn't work out. These other teams that are interested, let's see if you can work out a trade with them. So it wouldn't have changed our leverage. We still made sure to keep our leverage intact.
Yeah. So if you didn't have to work out a deal, because then you could just go back to Nick and say, well, that didn't work out. Go.
Correct.
Now we want to go to the other team.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Interesting. And so now you're negotiating this contract, right? To be clear, much different circumstances than you did in Houston, right? Because Deshaun hadn't played the year before. 2 years before, he was maybe the best quarterback in the league. And so, who are you doing this to go? Are you doing it with Andrew? Or?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, yeah, we're both big fans of, obviously, right? So great, Andrew Berry, phenomenal GM. What's important to Deshaun in this negotiation? Like, obviously he wanted to go there to win a championship, but like in terms of the contract, he's had a first round contract, which was great. He had a second deal, which was great. What's he looking for in this contract?
Man, it's funny, right? Because again, I say it again, Deshaun's focus has always been football. It's never really been a contract, right? So I think, honestly, it's probably more important for me than Deshaun, right? Deshaun wanted to, once he decided he wanted to be a Cleveland Brown, it was like, hey, I want to get there now and play football. Let's
trust you to do it.
Yeah, I want to get there. Obviously, I haven't been on the field in a while. I want to get back out there. He's itching to get back on the field. So that was what was the most important thing to him, was like, how do I get back on the field? How quickly can I get there? So he kind of left it up to us to figure out the contract side of it. He trusted us again. You hire an agent, you expect them to do their job. So for us again, we went back and looked at the quarterback market, and now we're looking at who's considered the highest paid quarterback in the league, right? And now we're using, that number that previously we kind of disregarded, which was the 45 over the 10-year period that Mahomes had. So we looked at that number, even though maybe that wasn't what he was making at that part of his career or those years, but we still looked at that because, again, we had a different type of leverage in that situation that, okay, this is the number. This is the highest paid quarterback number, 45, so we wanted to beat that number. So knowing that Mahomes is 45, our goal is to get above that.
Yeah. And to be clear, as we talk about Mahomes' deal, like, I don't know Patrick, I don't know if you know Patrick, but like, I'm sure he loved his deal, and that deal was perfect for him and the team, right? So it's, I never want to.
It's a lot of money regardless.
Yeah, I never want to judge anyone else unless I'm in the negotiating room, right? But so the deal was awesome for Patrick. But all right, so you just said like Deshaun hired an agent to do his job, right? Your job is to get a phenomenal contract. Yeah. Your job is clearly not to get a contract that is 100% guaranteed, because that doesn't happen in the NFL. AJ, break down the deal that let's go to the end of the story. What was the deal? And I'm going to come back and ask questions about it.
Yeah, I guess this is one of the rare occasions where, you're adding years onto a contract, and usually to value a deal that is, he had 4 years left, you're adding years onto it. You say, what are the new years and what is the new money that's added to it? And that's how we're going to value the deal. In this case, because he had 4 years and $136 million left on the deal, everyone kind of just values it as like, this is it's a tear up. We tore up the old contract. We're going to value this as a brand new 5-year, $46 million per year deal, $230 million, and all $230 million is fully guaranteed at signing, something that, it's never been done in the NFL, hadn't at the time, still hasn't been replicated to this point.
Yeah, and there's two things you said there which blow my mind, right? And again, this is a Pro Bowl quarterback who led the league in passing, right? So this is teams want him, right? And they're going to be willing to do things because it doesn't happen. You get a quarterback through the draft, and it's at best 50-50. Or you got Tom Brady, but very rarely do you have this opportunity, right? So, but the first thing you said, usually you have 3 years on the deal, you add 2, and you say, okay, you have 2 new years. Here's the new money. That's the new money APY, right? Very rarely do you just rip up the contract. I remember they did that with Darrelle Revis way back in the day, but why did that happen? Why did you even think that you could do that? And why were they willing to rip up the contract?
I think what you just said, right? This doesn't happen often, that you get a quarterback that's, kind of in the prime of his career that has the ability then to change teams, right? And for the Browns, they're looking at this is an opportunity where we get to kind of bring in a guy that we know what he is, right? We've seen him on the football field. We know what type of player he is. And so we believe he's a guy that could be the face of our franchise and kind of change kind of where we're headed. So for them, the contract I don't think mattered as much as what they were getting in return, right? If, no matter how much you spend, if you feel like you got a value for what you're getting, It makes sense. It's a good deal, right? Yep. So for them, it was hey, we have an opportunity to get a proven commodity here, which is not, like you said, that's tough to get. In the NFL, you got to draft guys and develop them and hope it works out. And rarely does a guy at this age become free. So I think for them, that was how they looked at it. For us, again, we were in our, Deshaun was in his prime. Maybe he hadn't played football in, I think at the time a year and a half, but he was in his prime, and we felt okay, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for him to maximize kind of his worth. And as we kind of talked through it with the Browns, there was interest in it being a 5-year deal as opposed to a 4-year deal. Obviously, if you're them, you want sign him for as long as possible. So that made sense, and for us, it made sense. Well, if we're going to do that, and everything that comes along with that, we wanted to make sure that we got the best terms that we could get. And by the time the conversation ended, we both agreed that, the 5-year deal at was it $46 million per year, $230 million all in, made the most sense for everybody.
Yeah. And we've talked about before, we really go for the 4-year. But I think, if you're going to go a 5-year, so you give up the 4, you get the 5. But if the fifth year is 100% guaranteed too, then
for us, he got that. That was that amount of. We felt at that amount of money for those many years. If it was fully guaranteed, we'd have done a 10-year deal if they're going to fully guarantee it, right? So for us, once it became fully guaranteed, we decided, that it made sense to go ahead and get it done.
I mean, I will say from the Browns' perspective too, it's only been 3 years since that deal was signed, and the top of the market went from the 46 that he signed for to now the top of the market is $60 million per year. So
and that's exactly why we didn't want to do the 10-year deal in Houston, right? Because we knew that the market would continue to grow, and if you lock yourself in for that many years, normally, if you believe in the player, it's not going to be a good deal.
Right? Yeah, and I think, in this case, obviously, it hasn't worked out like Cleveland wanted because of injuries and whatnot, right? But at the time of the signing, phenomenal deal for Deshaun. Maybe the best deal in NFL history. But at the same time, the Cleveland Browns, we got a franchise quarterback in his prime, and that we check that off and we go on.
Sure. And obviously, like you said, you can't control injuries, unfortunately. Yeah. But we have full faith that Deshaun's going to get back and be healthy. Once this Achilles injury heals up, and he'll be ready to go as soon as he's healthy.
Yeah. And I think that's the one thing that we can say over and over again. I can say I don't know Deshaun like you do, obviously, but I loved him when we signed him. I love him now. He's done so much for the charity. He's been great to Athletes First. Been great to my own family, through the SI Swim and stuff. So just a phenomenal person. But let's talk about this for a second. 100% guaranteed, right? So I'm on a trip because you guys don't need me to negotiate contracts anymore, and I'm with an NFL owner, and the news comes out, and we look at it, and he's like, "This can't be right," and I'm like, "No, that's right." I pretended I knew. That's right. And we had a debate. I said, this changes NFL quarterback deals forever, and it might change other positions as we go. Right now, AJ, we've done some deals for Dak and Herbert and David, you and Cass did for Jordan Love. They're not 100% guaranteed, right? But AJ, let me ask you first. What was the impact of this 100% guaranteed contract?
Yeah, I mean, it opened everyone's eyes right away to like, oh, this is something that can be done. I think around the league, teams were looking at each other saying, are we going to have to do that when our quarterback comes up for a contract? I think it's one of the reasons that you saw other quarterbacks, at least one specifically, who has multiple MVPs, it had to play out his entire rookie deal because, I think he kind of expected he was going to be the next man up to get a fully guaranteed deal. But because of this thing called the funding rule, which says that teams have to put the money into an escrow account as soon as it becomes fully guaranteed, owners don't want to do that. They don't want to say, I'm going to put $200 million into an account that isn't going to help me, accrue value and wealth.
Explain that. So Deshaun Watson signed a deal. It's $240 million guaranteed. The Cleveland Browns have to do what? They have to count money and put it somewhere else?
Right. Yeah. So they have to take the money that's fully guaranteed. They have to put it into an escrow account, and it's just going to sit there until it's time to actually pay the money out. So the $230 that's fully guaranteed, Deshaun's not going to get that all at once. He's going to get it over the 5 years of the deal. The amount that he's not getting paid is going to sit in escrow until it's time to pay him that money. Teams don't want to do that because it's going to sit there. It's not going to collect interest. It's not going to give them any way to capitalize that cash.
And not only that, not all teams have that type of cash on hand, right? Obviously, the Browns owner, he's independently wealthy outside of the Cleveland Browns, so he has that, the ability to do that. Not every NFL team and ownership has $230 million in cash laying around that they can put into an escrow account.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason that the rule is there, is that they want to level the playing field for the extremely wealthy owners who have that much cash and could go out and say, we'll fully guarantee it if we can get you, versus the owners who don't have as much cash and they're not able to do that. They want to level the playing field for those teams.
And we think it's an outdated rule. I think the reason also that, and initially it was done, when football, first started, the NFL first started, these teams weren't making the type of money they're making now, and football and the NFL wasn't as big of a business as it is now. So those, they were afraid that teams were going to guarantee contracts and not have the ability to pay the players, right? But now, obviously, that has changed with what the NFL has become. So every team has the ability to do it, but the teams have just been slow to change and not want to change that rule. The owners don't want to change that rule because they know once that rule changes that you have to fund all that money up front, that's going to lead to a lot more fully guaranteed contracts. But irregardless of that, I think that contract has helped, teams now see that they're going to have to guarantee more money.
Yeah.
So as you look at these quarterback deals, maybe 100% of these deals aren't guaranteed, but now there's more percentage of these deals guaranteed than ever before, not only for quarterbacks, but even other position guys, right, where you're seeing a lot more guarantees come into play. So I would say, the way things are trending, we're going to start seeing fully guaranteed quarterback contracts here, pretty soon.
Can I ask you a question? So $230 million guarantee.
Correct.
100% guarantee they have to put in escrow. If it was $229 million guaranteed and $1 million not guaranteed, do they have to put any in escrow?
Yeah, all of it that is fully guaranteed.
Okay, so the contract doesn't have to be fully guaranteed. It's just whatever amounts of money is fully guaranteed. So if there's 180, they put that in, right?
Right. Yeah. So if 60 million of the 230 is fully guaranteed, and they're going to pay out 20 of it now, the other 40 of that fully guaranteed amount is going to go into escrow.
Yeah, and the confusion comes. I wasn't really confused, but the confusion comes from fully guaranteed. What does that mean?
That means you have guaranteed. So to kind of take it backwards, like in the NFL, there are 3 different types of guarantees. You have a skill guarantee, there's an injury guarantee, and a cap guarantee. So unless you have all 3 of those guarantees, the money's not considered fully guaranteed, right? Because if you have a skill guarantee and you get hurt or they need your cap dollars, they can still cut you, right? So you'd have to have all 3 of those guarantees for a certain dollar amount for that to be considered fully guaranteed. Yeah. So in Deshaun's case, the $230 million was fully guaranteed for skills, fully guaranteed for cap, and it was fully guaranteed for injury. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because so that's amazing. And I think I agree with you, David and AJ. I think that deal that you all did, you were part of that deal, weren't you?
Yeah.
That's why the first one wasn't fully guaranteed, because you were part of it. But, I think that deal that you did with that type of guarantee sent a message to the NFL, to other agents, to owners and players like, hey, baseball is fully guaranteed. Basketball is fully guaranteed. There's not as much risk of injury in either one of those sports. it's time to start fully guaranteeing. And, one thing I think the agent community can work on, hopefully, is changing the funding rule, because it doesn't, it's kind of obsolete in my mind. I've never had to fund anything like that, but your salary, but, it's, I think that's one thing that we can work on in the future and try to change. Is that something you guys would focus on?
Yeah. It's a little above our head, unfortunately. That's an NFLPA thing, but, there's a few things that we'd love to get changed, whether it's the funding rule, whether it's the franchise tag. There's a few things that we'd love to get changed. The 5th-year option for first-round draft picks. So, there's a list of things that, if it was up to us, agents, that we'd love to get changed. But again, the PA, there's a lot, it's a give and take, right? You don't just get to go to the owners and say, hey, we want A, B, and C, right? There's going to be some type of negotiation. There's going to be trade-offs. So, obviously, every time there's a new CBA, we hope to think it's better and better for the players.
Well, as we learned the last 2 episodes, I mean, if you can go and sign Deshaun Watson after a national championship and then get the first deal and get the second deal, you should be able to change the funding rule. I mean,
we're working on it. We're working on it.
All right. Well, listen, that's an unbelievable story, one that I really enjoyed living vicariously through you all. And I think on behalf of agents everywhere and players everywhere, we thank you guys for that deal. Lessons learned at the end of this episode. Obviously, I'll go first. It's an interesting one, right? But I think my lesson learned, it goes back to, AJ, what we talked about Drew Bledsoe back in the day, where he did that big deal and then he got hurt and then Tom Brady took over, and just watching the way he dealt with everything, and that, in our careers with our players, like, it's never going to be just all roses, never going to be just awesome, right? And I think as our job, we want to get the $230 million fully guaranteed contract, but also our job is to be there during times of adversity, whether it is an injury, whether it's poor play, whether it's a tough contract negotiation, whether it's off field, whatever it is. And I think that it's really great to have watched you through Deshaun's process and knowing what a great guy Deshaun is, and being able to overcome the adversity of his injury the first year, all the things that happened in Houston and whatnot, and just continuously come out on top, and have that solidarity with your clients, with Athletes First, with all of our clients, all of our employees, and just watching everyone work together to get the best result possible, no matter whether it's sunny or rainy, And I think that's something we're blessed to be able to do that, right? We're blessed to be able to help these guys through their journey, and then we're blessed to be there when they sign, arguably the greatest NFL deal of all time. So, my job is a blessing, I guess, is my lesson, because I get to work with you guys. AJ?
I think my lesson on this one is that going into any negotiation, like, you're not going to get something you don't ask for, right? And just because no one had gotten this fully guaranteed contract before, you have to dream it. You have to believe it. You have to say, like, this is a guy who I believe in, who deserves this type of contract. And when you go to the Cleveland Browns and you say, like, this is what I think we need, and they do it, it's something that you're never going to get unless you ask for it. So being able to come up with that and think creatively and say, like, how am I going to push the boundaries, I think is the big lesson in this one.
And I think the only way you do that is you show the team that it works for them, right? I mean, hey, this is what we want, this is what we deserve, and this is why it works for you. And you guys did a phenomenal casebook study job in that negotiation. But what about you, David?
No, I think you guys hit it on the head. I think, as you said, when you're dealing in negotiations, obviously you have to, you got to be reasonable, but at the same time, you're never going to get anything you don't ask for, right? And not only things that you ask for, but you should be able to explain why you think these things are achievable, and kind of to tie what you said in, why it's beneficial for both parties, right? In this situation, we wanted a fully guaranteed contract. Getting a guy of his caliber at that age, that we knew the team, they value another year, 5th year, to be added onto the contract. So there's a win-win there. And anytime you're able to get a win-win, it normally works out well.
David, once again, we thank you. You listening to your stories is mind-boggling. We're going to bring you back for a record 3rd podcast episode. You're going to set a record there as well.
Man.
And next episode, we're going to bring Andrew Kessel in, who we talked about in the last episode. And we're going to talk about your guys' relationship of Jordan Love and the record-breaking deal you did for Jordan Love. So look forward to having you back. Thanks for your time.
I can't wait.
I know you can.
Not